Namaskar friends. IndiGo Airlines massive flight cancellation fiasco. What really happened? Never assume your flight is safe just because you hit book now. You already booked, your plans are ready. So say no. IndiGo just proved how fast the sky can fall apart. Last week, India's largest airline went from smooth skies to absolute chaos. If you have been wondering why thousands of passengers were stranded, why ticket prices suddenly shot up like fireworks 10 times sometimes, or why IndiGo seemed completely overwhelmed, let's see what has happened. The real story is not just about cancelled flights. It's about planning mistakes, new safety rules, and a chain reaction that pushed the entire aviation system to the edge. Imagine waking up, getting ready for your long planned trip, reaching the airport with all your bags in the traffic snarling and other things. People who live in city very well know reaching airport without traffic problem is not that easy. And only to see a giant red banner next to your flight number saying cancelled. Now, multiply that by hundreds of cancellations. That is exactly what played out across India between December 1 and 7. More than 5.5 lakhs tickets were cancelled. Airports like Delhi, Mumbai and Bengaluru and Chennai also turned into giant waiting rooms. Passengers slept on floors because cancellation has happened suddenly. People reach the airport and they stay in the floor. Kids cried. People protested. Naturally, you spend thousands of rupees and you are made to sit on the ground in the airport. But surprisingly, the trouble did not start with the weather or a sudden technical failure. The mist had been building slowly, and the final push came from something that was supposed to make flying safer. That is, from November 2025, the new DGCA pilot duty rules kicked in. These rules were not random. They were given notice of 2 years at least. And these rules were designed to reduce pilot fatigue. Because tired pilots and 80-ton aircrafts are not a great mix. That is doomed for catastrophe. That is why the new rules were very strict, and they have given all the airlines 2 years time to change. And the rules increased mandatory rest periods from 36 to 48 hours in a week, restricted number of night landings from 6 to 2 landings, that is from midnight 12 o'clock to early morning 6 o'clock. Earlier, up to 5 o'clock they called it. In that 5-hour window, 6 landings were allowed. The flights will be flying like anything. But now they have made it as the night hour as 12 midnight to 6 o'clock, 6-hour window, but only 2 landings. That means the flying system has been reduced by 1/3 to 1/3 rather. So not only that, the consecutive night duties for pilots have been capped to 2 nights only. That is, a pilot can continue to work night duties only for 2 nights. Afterwards, they should be given to daytime and off and other things. These were all meant to increase the safety arrangements. But all of this meant, again, airlines needed more pilots to operate the same number of flights. IndiGo claims to run a very high utilization model. Its planes barely sit on the ground because they will be running always and people will be having more time of work. That was great when everything is smooth. But when regulations change and crew availability drops, the system collapses like a house of cards. Despite having 2 years notice, IndiGo did not hire enough buffer crew, and when the new rules fully kicked in on November 1st, the airline suddenly found itself without an ability to legally schedule enough pilots for its massive network. Then came the perfect storm. Winter congestion at major airports, a few technical glitches, of course, what not, the bad weather in patches, and schedules that were already stretched too thin. One small disruption led to another. Crews crossed their duty limits. More flights naturally got cancelled. Baggages piled up, and the whole thing spiraled into a national meltdown. Passengers felt the heat instantly because thousands of flights were cancelled in a single day. So the result is airfares on other airlines skyrocketed. For travel between Delhi and Chennai, normal rates would have been 6 to 10 to 12,000 rupees. But that has been charged as 40,000 and 50,000 for economy class. The scenario is people paid more for just 1 hour flight within India. They usually pay for an international trip. Even the domestic charges actually were more than the travel between India and even USA. That was the sort of problem the air travelers are facing in the last 1 week. Of course, the checked-in baggages went missing or arrived later. Refunds were very slow, and many claimed that they did not receive even water while waiting for hours and days. It was chaos in its purest form. But here is the big question. If the rules were announced long ago, that is 2 years ago, why was not IndiGo prepared? How does an airline with such a massive market share, that is more than 60%, I think 62 to 65%, misjudge something this serious issue? But what does this mean for passengers who depend on reliable or affordable flights? Let us look at how things unfolded once the crisis hit. First, cancellations peaked at over 1,000 flights on worst days. That is not a small number because lakhs of people will get stranded automatically. Second, the government had to step in. The Ministry of Civil Aviation invoked emergency regulatory powers and told IndiGo to restore operations faster than the airline said it could do. It also banned rescheduling fees, so passengers would not be charged against flight cancellations, which were not in any case not their fault. And because other airlines instantly increased fares, the government had to announce temporary caps. The caps were like up to 500 kilometer flight, the maximum cap was 7,500. 500 to 1,000 kilometer flight, 12,000 rupees. 1,000 to 1,500 kilometer distance, 15,000 rupees. Above 1,500 kilometers, 18,000 rupees. Plus, of course, usual UDF and PSF, other taxes. But at least they stopped airlines from turning desperation into huge windfall profit for them. Meanwhile, DGCA issued a Show-Cause notice to IndiGo and also allowed a one-time exemption for certain duty rules just to help stabilize the network. It was not ideal, but it prevented the situation from getting worse. IndiGo set up a crisis management group, fast-tracked refunds, and processed over 827 crore rupees for passengers affected between November 21st and December 7. They also began returning thousands of lost bags and clearing the backlog pieces piece by piece. By December 8, The operations finally started showing signs of recovery. IndiGo planned 1,802 flights that day with about 500 cancellations instead of the earlier 1,000 cancellations. Still painful, but at least the system was crawling back to life. But the key moment here is not just the recovery. It is the realization that safety rules, when not planned properly, can create massive public disruption. And the bigger airline, the bigger the shock wave when something breaks.